The wreckage had been smoking for 3 days before anyone got close enough to investigate. Dr. Allison Reed adjusted her respirator and picked her way through the twisted metal scattered across the red soil of Tilos. For the cargo ship had come down hard in the night, breaking apart on impact. Most crashes this far from the colony went uninvestigated for weeks, but Allison had heard something on her morning survey run. Not the usual groan of cooling metal or the hiss of leaking fuel lines. Something else. Something alive. The other colonists thought she was wasting her time. Governor Peters had told her plainly that salvage crews would handle it when they had free personnel. Nobody expected survivors from a crash that violent, but Allison had spent 15 years studying alien biology, and she knew the difference between mechanical sounds and organic ones. Something in that wreckage was breathing. She found the source in what remained of the cargo hold. The impact had torn the reinforced chamber open like a flower, scattering containment pods across 50 meters of desert. Most were empty. 2 were crushed beyond recognition. But one pod had landed intact against a boulder, its door hanging open, and inside was a nightmare. The Vral lay dying in a pool of dark blood. Allison had never seen one in person. Nobody had, not up close, not and lived to tell about it. The creature was easily 4 meters long, its body covered in midnight scales that seemed to drink in the light. 6 limbs, each ending in claws as long as Allison's forearm. A head that was all sharp angles and teeth. The stories said that Vral could tear through starship hulls with those claws. That they hunted in packs and left nothing but bones behind. That 3 Vral had once wiped out an entire mining colony of 2,000 souls in a single night. The creature's breathing was shallow and wet. One of its eyes tracked Allison as she approached, but it made no move to attack. It couldn't. Half its body was crushed beneath a fallen support beam. Blood pooled beneath it, already drying in the desert heat. Then Allison heard the other sound. The small one. Tucked against the adult Vral's chest, barely visible in the shadows, was a cub. It couldn't have been more than a few months old, small enough that Allison could have held it in both hands. Its scales were a lighter gray than the adult's, marked with silver streaks that caught what little light filtered into the wreckage. The cub was making a high-pitched keening sound, pressing itself against its parent. Allison froze. Every instinct screamed at her to run. Even dying, the adult Vral was dangerous. One swipe of those claws would end her. But the creature wasn't looking at her with hunger or rage. Its eye held something else. Something Allison had seen before in a dozen different species across as many worlds. Desperation. The Vral shifted, a movement that must have cost it enormous pain. It used one trembling limb to push the cub away from its body, toward Allison. The cub mewed in protest, trying to burrow back against the warmth it knew, but the adult pushed again. Insistent. Determined. "You want me to take it?" Allison whispered. Not a question. A realization. The Vral's eye closed slowly, then opened again, the closest thing to a nod that a dying creature could manage. Then its breathing changed, becoming more labored, more shallow. It had minutes left, maybe less, and it was spending them pushing its child toward the only living thing nearby. Toward a human who, by all rights, it should have seen as an enemy. Allison made her decision in the space between heartbeats. She moved forward slowly, hands visible, making soft sounds she hoped were soothing. The cub watched her with eyes that were too large for its face, the same deep amber as its parents'. When Allison reached for it, the cub hissed, displaying a row of needle-sharp teeth. But it didn't strike. It was scared, not aggressive. "I know," Allison murmured. "I know you're scared, but I'm going to help you. I promise." She lifted the cub carefully. It was lighter than she expected, all bone and scale and frightened trembling. The moment it left contact with the adult, it began to wail, a sound that cut straight through Allison's chest. She turned back to the dying Vral, cradling the cub against her chest. "I'll keep it safe," she said. She didn't know if the creature could understand her words, but maybe tone was enough. Maybe intention was enough. "I won't let anyone hurt it. I swear." The Vral's eye focused on her one last time. Then its breathing stopped, and the most feared predator in the known galaxy died alone in the wreckage of a crashed cargo hauler, on a world it had never meant to visit. Allison stood there for a long moment, holding the orphaned cub. It had stopped wailing and now simply shivered against her, making small distressed sounds. She could feel its heart beating against her palm, fast and frantic. This close, she could see that its scales weren't just gray, but held hints of blue and purple in the right light. that its claws, while sharp, were barely longer than her thumbnail, that it was, despite everything she had been taught about its species, just a baby. The walk back to the colony took an hour. By the time Allison reached the main habitat, word had already spread. Colonists stopped what they were doing to stare. Some backed away. Others reached for weapons they weren't carrying. Governor Peters met her at the entrance to the medical bay, his face pale. "Tell me that's not what I think it is," he said. "Its name is River," Allison replied, surprising herself. She hadn't planned to name it. Names meant attachment. Names meant keeping. But the name had come to her during the walk, watching the way the silver markings on the cub's scales seemed to flow like water. "Allison, you can't be serious. That thing is a Vrail." "This thing is an orphan," Allison corrected, "and I made a promise." Peters ran a hand through his thinning hair. "The Galactic Council has standing orders. Any Vrail found is to be reported and eliminated immediately. No exceptions. Then don't report it. That's not how this works. That creature is dangerous. Its species has killed billions across the galaxy. You're asking me to violate every protocol we have. I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that maybe we've been wrong." Allison looked down at the cub in her arms. River had stopped trembling and was watching the conversation with intelligent eyes. What if Vrail are only dangerous because we've made them that way? What if they're aggressive because they're constantly hunted? This cub doesn't know how to hate yet. It doesn't know what it's supposed to be. And if you're wrong, if it grows up and kills someone, then I'll take full responsibility. But at least let me try. Let me see if love is stronger than instinct. Peters was quiet for a long time. Around them, colonists whispered and watched. Finally, the governor sighed. "You have 1 month. Keep it confined to your habitat. Daily reports on its behavior. And if it shows any sign of aggression, any sign at all, this experiment ends. Understood?" "Understood." Allison carried River to her small quarters on the colony's edge. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms and basic amenities, but it was home. She set up a sleeping area in the corner, lined with soft materials. River explored tentatively, sniffing everything, occasionally looking back to make sure Allison was still there. When night fell on Telos 4, Allison lay on her bed and watched the cub curl up in its makeshift nest. River's eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, reflecting the emergency lighting. The cub should have been settling down to sleep. Instead, it was watching Allison as if afraid she might disappear. "Come here," Allison said softly, patting the bed beside her. River's ears perked up. The cub hesitated, then scrambled across the floor and climbed onto the bed with far more grace than its small size suggested. It circled twice, then curled up against Allison's side, tucking its head under her arm. Allison felt the cub's breathing slow and deepen, felt the rapid heartbeat gradually calm, and for the first time since finding the wreckage, she let herself wonder what she had really agreed to. She was responsible now for one of the galaxy's most feared creatures. She had promised a dying mother that she would protect its child. She had looked Governor Peters in the eye and asked him to trust her with something that could theoretically kill everyone on this colony. River made a small sound in its sleep, somewhere between a purr and a chirp. Its claws flexed against Allison's arm but didn't break the skin. In sleep, with its features relaxed, it looked less like a monster and more like what it actually was. A baby who had lost everything and been given to a stranger. "We'll figure this out together," Allison whispered into the darkness. "I don't know how to raise a Vrail, and you don't know how to be one yet. Maybe that's enough. Maybe we can make something new." River's only answer was a contented sigh. Outside, the twin moons of Telos IV rose over the desert, casting silver light across a colony where humans had just taken in the impossible, where fear and compassion had met in the wreckage of a crashed ship, and compassion had won, where the story that would one day change an entire empire had quietly, impossibly begun. 3 years changed everything and nothing at all. River had grown. What had once fit in Allison's arms now stood as tall as her waist, with a body length that stretched nearly 2 meters from nose to tail. The silver markings that had been subtle as a cub now blazed across her scales like lightning frozen in stone. She moved with a grace that made the local wildlife look clumsy by comparison. 6 limbs working in perfect coordination as she bounded across the red desert surrounding the colony. Yet despite her size, despite the claws that could now tear through metal plating, Despite the strength that let her drag loads that would have required machinery, River was still the same cub who had curled up against Allison's side on that first night. She still made the chirping sound when happy. She still refused to sleep unless she could hear Allison's breathing. She still brought Allison rocks and interesting plants she found, presenting them like treasures and waiting for approval. The colonists had adapted, though not all of them had adapted willingly. Some still crossed to the other side of the path when they saw River coming. Some still kept their children indoors when she was outside. But others had learned what Allison knew from the start. River was different. River was gentle. The children learned fastest. The colony school had 17 students ranging from 5 to 12 years old, and by the end of the first year, every one of them had touched River's scales. By the end of the second year, they were using her as a climbing structure during recess. Now in year 3, it was common to see River
lying in the schoolyard while children braided the
flexible spines along her back or practiced their reading by telling her stories. Governor Peters had extended his deadline 11 times. The reports Allison sent him grew from daily to weekly to monthly. Each one documented River's behavior, her development, her interactions with colonists. The data was remarkable. River showed problem-solving abilities that rivaled some of the galaxy's most intelligent species. She responded to verbal commands in 3 languages. She could identify colonists by scent from 100 meters away, and she had never, not once in 3 years, shown unprovoked aggression. That was why the arrival of the Galactic Council research team caused such tension. Allison saw their ship land from her lab window. It was a sleek council diplomatic vessel, all chrome and authority. She had known they would come eventually. Reports about River had leaked beyond the colony within the first 6 months. Allison had spent 2 years answering increasingly pointed questions from council officials. It was only a matter of time before they sent people to investigate in person. Ambassador Fenn led the delegation. He was Taurian, a species that looked vaguely like Earth's otters if otters stood upright and wore diplomatic sashes. His fur was graying around the muzzle, and his eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. Allison knew the Taurian history with Vrail. Every schoolchild in the galaxy knew it. 400 years ago, a Vrail swarm had descended on the Taurian homeworld. By the time the attack ended, 3 billion Taurians were dead. Their civilization had barely survived. Dr. Reed, Fenn said when they met in the colony's main hall. His voice was carefully neutral. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I wasn't aware I had a choice, Allison replied. You always have choices. That is the privilege of sentient beings. But some choices have more consequences than others. Fenn gestured to the 5 other delegates behind him. We are here to evaluate the situation and provide recommendations to the full council. Where is the Vrail? Her name is River and she's outside with the children. The delegation exchanged looks. One of them, a crystalline shard named Lux, actually took a step backward. You allow it near children? I allow her near everyone. She's not a prisoner. She is a Vrail, Fenn said quietly. Forgive my bluntness, Doctor, but your attachment to this creature does not change what it is. Vrail are apex predators. They are driven by instinct to hunt and kill. Keeping one in a civilian population is irresponsible at best, catastrophic at worst. Come meet her, Allison said. See for yourself. They walked to the schoolyard in tense silence. Allison could see River from 100 meters away, her dark scales stark against the red soil. She was lying on her side while 2 of the younger children used her as a slide, scrambling up her back and squealing with delight as they slid down her flank. 3 more children were playing some kind of game that involved tossing a ball for River to catch. She caught it gently in her jaws, careful not to puncture it, and dropped it back for them to throw again. The delegation stopped walking. Lux made a sound like wind chimes in distress. Another delegate, a stocky Hrogan, put his hand on his weapon. That is not possible, Fenn said. His voice had lost all neutrality. It was simply stunned. It's very possible. You're watching it happen. Vrail do not play. Vrail do not show restraint. They certainly do not allow themselves to be used as playground equipment by prey species. River does. Allison raised her voice. River, come here, please. The Vrail's head came up immediately. She spotted Allison and made her happy chirping sound, dislodging the 2 children on her back with an apologetic rumble. They laughed and ran off to join the ball game. River crossed the distance to Allison in 3 powerful bounds, skidding to a stop that threw up dust. Up close, she was even more imposing. Her head was level with Allison's chest. Her amber eyes were the size of dinner plates. When she opened her mouth to pant, teeth longer than fingers gleamed in the afternoon light. The delegation backed up as one. "River, this is Ambassador Fenn and his colleagues. Can you say hello?" River tilted her head, considering the visitors. Then she lowered her front body in what Allison had trained as a bow, keeping her gaze downcast in a gesture of non-aggression. The delegate stared. "She understands social protocols?" Fenn asked faintly. "She understands about 50 different commands and concepts. Sit, stay, come, gentle, danger, friend, threat, help. She knows the names of every colonist. She can count to 20. Last month she figured out how to open the supply shed door. Not by breaking it, but by watching someone enter the code and memorizing the sequence. That level of intelligence makes her more dangerous, not less." The Hrogan delegate said. "Smart predators are the ones that kill you. Smart beings are the ones you can reason with," Allison countered. She looked at Fenn. "You lost people to Vrel. Your entire species carries that trauma. I understand that, and I'm not asking you to forget it. But I am asking you to consider what might have caused that attack. We've been treating Vrel like mindless monsters for centuries. What if they were defending themselves? What if they attacked your world because your people pushed into their territory first? You blame us for our own genocide?" Fenn's voice was very quiet. "I blame both sides for not trying to understand each other, and I blame the systems that taught everyone it was impossible to coexist." Allison put her hand on River's neck. The scales were warm from the sun. "She's not a monster, Ambassador. She's a person. And if one human can teach a Vrel to be gentle, imagine what could happen if we tried to teach peace to all of them." Before Fenn could respond, an alarm started blaring from the colony center. Every adult froze. The children looked around in confusion. River's head snapped toward the sound, ears flattening against her skull. Governor Peters' voice came over the emergency channel. "Medical emergency. Collapse at the northern mine shaft. Multiple trapped. All personnel respond." Allison's blood went cold. The northern mine was the colony's primary resource extraction site, a network of tunnels that stretched deep into Telos 4's crust. Collapses were rare but deadly. She started running toward the mine without thinking. Behind her she heard the delegates following, and behind them, the distinctive sound of River's claws on stone. The scene at the mine entrance was chaos. Miners stood around the main shaft, arguing over rescue approaches. Smoke rose from the tunnel mouth. Someone was shouting about oxygen levels. Someone else was saying the entire tunnel network was unstable. Allison grabbed the nearest foreman. "How many trapped?" 17. Maybe more. The main support gave way during the shift change. "We can't reach them. Every time we try to go in, more of the ceiling comes down. How long do they have? Hour, maybe 2 before their air runs out. But we'll never dig them out in time. The tunnel is completely blocked." River pushed past Allison, moving to the mine entrance. She stood there, nostrils flaring, breathing deeply. Then she made a sound Allison had never heard before, a low resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground. "She can smell them," Allison realized. "She can sense where they are. What good does that do?" the foreman asked. "We still can't reach them." Allison looked at River, then at the tunnel, then back at River. The Vrel was smaller than a human in some dimensions, more flexible, built for navigating tight spaces while hunting. And her scales were hard enough to withstand falling debris that would crush a human. "River can reach them," Allison said. "Absolutely not," Fenn interjected. "You cannot send an apex predator into a confined space with trapped injured humans. It would be a slaughter. It would be a rescue." Allison knelt beside River, looking into those amber eyes. "River, listen to me. There are people in the tunnel. They're hurt. They're scared. Can you help them?" River looked at the tunnel, then back at Allison. She made her questioning chirp. "I know it's dangerous. I know you're scared too. But they need you. They need someone small enough and strong enough to reach them. Can you do that?" River's ears came forward. She touched her nose to Allison's forehead, a gesture of trust they had developed over the years. Then she turned to the tunnel and, before anyone could stop her, disappeared into the darkness. "This is insane," the Hrogan delegate said. "She'll kill them all. She'll save them all," Allison replied. But inside she was praying she was right. The minutes stretched like hours. Allison stood at the tunnel entrance, fighting every instinct that screamed at her to follow River inside. The delegates watched in tense silence. The miners watched their monitoring equipment, tracking the tremors that ran through the ground as River moved deeper into the unstable tunnel. Then someone's radio crackled to life. A voice weak and desperate. "Something's here. Something's moving toward us. Oh God, I can see its eyes. It's a Vral. There's a Vral in the tunnel." Allison grabbed the radio. "Don't panic. Her name is River. She's there to help you. Let her work. It's clearing the rubble." "It's actually clearing the rubble. How is this possible?" "Because she's not what you think she is," Allison said softly. "None of them are." It took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of listening to radio reports, of tracking River's progress, of wondering if the entire tunnel system would collapse. But one by one, the trapped miners made it to the entrance, guided by a creature they had been taught to fear since childhood. River stayed below until the last miner was safe, using her body to hold up a section of tunnel that threatened to collapse. When she finally emerged, she was covered in dust and small cuts. One of her limbs was bleeding where falling rock had caught her. But she was alive, and 17 colonists were alive because of her. The last miner out, a woman named Patricia, stopped at the entrance. She looked at River, then at Allison, then back at River. She put herself between us and a secondary collapse. She held up the ceiling with her own back while we crawled past. She saved us. Ambassador Fenn stood very still, watching River collapse in exhaustion at the tunnel entrance, surrounded by miners who should have been terrified, and were instead thanking her, thanking Avral, the thing that had killed 3 billion of his people. "I need to send a report to the council," he said finally. "I do not know what I'm going to tell them." Allison knelt beside River, checking her injuries. "Tell them the truth. Tell them that maybe it's time we all learned something new." The galaxy learned about River in stages like ripples spreading across still water. First came the official report from Ambassador Fenn, carefully worded and backed by video evidence. Then came the miners' testimonies. 17 people willing to stand before council recorders and describe how a Vrail had saved their lives. Then came the children's drawings, sent to their relatives on other worlds, showing a creature with silver-marked scales playing games and being gentle. Then came the backlash. The footage spread through galactic networks faster than anyone could have predicted. News services showed the same clips on repeat. River catching a ball. River bowing to the delegates. River emerging from the collapsed mine. The commentary divided sharply. Some called it proof that Vral could be reasoned with. Others called it propaganda or tricks or the calm before River inevitably turned on the colonists and murdered them all. The extremist groups were loudest. The Coalition for Galactic Safety posted River's location and called for volunteers to eliminate the threat before it matured. The Taurian Survivors League, made up of descendants of the homeworld attack, issued statements saying Allison's experiment was an insult to the dead. Someone created a countdown clock titled Days Until the Telos 4 Massacre, and it went viral across 40 systems. Allison tried to ignore the noise, but it was everywhere. The colony's communication channels were flooded. Death threats arrived daily, some aimed at River, some aimed at Allison, some aimed at the entire colony for allowing the situation to continue. Governor Peters posted security at the colony perimeter, though everyone knew it would do little good if someone decided to attack. But not all the attention was negative. Scientists began arriving, requesting permission to study River. Xenopsychologists, evolutionary biologists, behaviorists. They came from universities and research institutes across the council space, drawn by the opportunity to learn about a species that had been too dangerous to study. Allison vetted each one carefully before allowing access. Some she turned away immediately when their proposals talked about River as a specimen rather than a person. Others she welcomed, and Telos 4 suddenly became an impromptu research hub. Then the other visitors started arriving. Allison was reviewing neural scan data when Governor Peters called her to his office. His expression was unreadable, which usually meant complicated news. "We have a situation," he said. 3 ships just entered orbit. They're not council vessels. Pirates?" Allison felt her chest tighten. "Pirates would absolutely try to capture River for sale on black markets." "No. They're Vral." The words hung in the air between them. Allison's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. If Wild Vral had tracked River's scent across space, if they saw her as territory to reclaim or a threat to eliminate, the colony could be destroyed in minutes. "They're requesting permission to land," Peters continued. They're requesting to meet with you specifically. In writing. In perfect galactic standard. Vral can write? Apparently these ones can. They identify themselves as the scattered people. Refugees who fled their homeworld centuries ago when the persecution started. They've been watching our communications about River. They want to talk. The 3 ships landed at the colony's edge 2 hours later. They were old vessels patched and repaired countless times, held together by determination more than structural integrity. The Vral who emerged moved cautiously, their body language screaming wariness. There were 12 of them, ranging in size from slightly smaller than River to nearly twice her length. Their scales showed patterns Allison had never seen, spirals and geometric designs, dots and waves. The largest one approached first. Its scales were deep purple, marked with white stars that seemed to glow faintly in Telosterfor's afternoon light. It stopped 10 meters from Allison and lowered itself to the ground, pressing its body flat in what Allison recognized as profound submission. "I am Night Sky," it said, and Allison's translator implant rendered the growls and clicks into words. "We come seeking understanding, not conflict. We mean no harm to you or your people." "You can speak," Allison said, then felt foolish. "I mean, I've only ever heard River vocalize. I didn't know Vral had language." "We do. We have stories and songs and arguments that last for days. We have poetry and mathematics and philosophy. We had all of this before the galaxy decided we were monsters." Night Sky's voice carried centuries of grief. "Your species calls us Vral, that is your word for us. Our word for ourselves translates to people who remember stars. We came from a world of night skies so bright you could hunt by starlight alone." The other Vral had fanned out, keeping distance between themselves and the colonists who had gathered to watch. River emerged from the research building, drawn by the commotion. She froze when she saw the other Vral, every muscle in her body tense. Night Sky made a sound, something between a hum and a melody. River's ears pricked forward. Night Sky sang again, and this time River responded, her voice uncertain but mimicking the pattern. The exchange continued back and forth, and Allison realized she was watching River speak her native language for the first time in her life. "What are they saying?" Governor Peters whispered. "She's telling River that she's beautiful," Allison's translator implant provided. "She's saying River has the star markings of the old bloodlines. She's welcoming her home." River moved forward slowly. Night Sky remained still, letting the younger Vral set the pace. When River got close enough, she touched her nose to Night Sky's, then made a sound that was unmistakably a question. "River wants to know why she was alone," Night Sky said, switching back to galactic standard. "Why her mother was in a cage on that ship." She turned her attention to Allison. "Can you tell her? Do you know?" "The cargo ship was running illegal wildlife," Allison said quietly. "They were taking Vral to sell to private collectors, keeping them as trophies or for fighting rings. River's mother died trying to escape so River could survive." Night Sky's entire body shuddered. Several of the other Vral made low keening sounds. "This is why we hide," Night Sky said. "This is why we scatter and run and never stay in one place. Because to the galaxy we are not people. We are monsters to be hunted or prizes to be captured. We are never just allowed to exist." "Then why reveal yourselves now?" Peters asked. "You could have stayed hidden." "Because for the first time in 400 years someone treated one of us with kindness. Because this human found a Vral cub and chose to love it instead of kill it. Because River learned to be gentle when every instinct we carry says trust no one. Attack first, survive at all costs." Night Sky's gaze fixed on Allison. "You have done something impossible, human. You have raised River to believe the galaxy can be safe. But it is not safe. It will never be safe for her. So what do you want?" Allison asked. "We want to tell you the truth. The truth that was buried under centuries of propaganda and fear. We want you to understand what your people are fighting to protect when they defend River." Night Sky stood, and the other Vral moved closer, forming a loose circle. 400 years ago, we were not monsters. We were explorers. We had our own ships, our own trade routes. We met other species and learned from them. We shared our knowledge and our culture. Then why does every species in the galaxy have horror stories about Vral? Peters asked. Because we lived on worlds rich in rare minerals. Because our territory included 3 major hyperlane routes. Because we refused to be displaced from lands we had inhabited for millennia. Another Vral spoke up, this one with scales the color of rust. The mining corporations came first. They asked to extract resources from our dead worlds, the moons and asteroids in our system. We agreed, then they wanted more. They wanted our habitable worlds. When we refused, they hired mercenaries. The first attacks came at night, Night Sky continued. They destroyed our nursery colonies, places where we raised our young. They killed thousands of cubs. When we fought back, when we defended ourselves, they called it unprovoked aggression. They took footage of Vral attacking ships and never showed what came before. Never showed the destroyed homes. Never showed the dead children. The Taurian homeworld, Allison said. 3 billion dead. How do you explain that? We cannot, Night Sky said simply. That attack was real. The deaths were real. But what your histories don't say is that for 5 years before that attack, Taurian mining fleets had been systematically destroying our breeding grounds in that sector. They poisoned 3 worlds we used for laying eggs. They hunted our matriarchs for sport. When we sent delegations to request they stop, those delegates were captured and sold to fighting rings. The swarm that hit the Taurian homeworld was made up of parents who had lost everything. They were wrong to attack civilians. That grief does not justify genocide, but they were not mindless monsters. They were people pushed past the breaking point. The colonists were silent. Allison felt the weight of Night Sky's words settle over the gathering like physical pressure. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why not present this to the council? We tried. For decades we tried. But the corporations had more money. They had better propaganda. And honestly, we were not good at your kind of politics. We spoke too directly. We showed too much emotion. We looked like monsters, so you decided we must be monsters, and nothing we said could change that. Night Sky gestured to River with one limb. Until a human looked at one of us and saw a child who needed help instead of a threat to eliminate. River had been listening to the exchange, her head swiveling between speakers. Now she moved to stand beside Allison, pressing against her side in a gesture of trust and need. Allison put her hand on River's neck. What happens now? Allison asked. Now you choose, Night Sky said. The council is watching Talos 4. They are deciding whether River is an anomaly or proof that Vral can coexist with other species. Your next actions will determine the future of every Vral still alive in this galaxy. Will you keep River hidden away? Let her be a curiosity for scientists. Will you let them take her to be studied in some secure facility? Or will you fight for her right to exist freely? Before Allison could answer, another alarm sounded. This time it was the proximity alert for the colony perimeter. Peters checked his datapad and his face went pale. We have incoming. Fast movers. Military signatures. They're not answering hails. How many? Allison asked. 8 ships. Dreadnought class. They're coalition for galactic safety vessels. They're here to kill River. The Vral refugees moved as one, forming a defensive circle around River. Night Sky's voice dropped to a growl. We will not let them take her. You can't fight dreadnoughts with those ships, Peters said. They'll destroy all of us. Allison's mind raced. 8 dreadnoughts meant serious firepower. It meant the extremists had moved beyond threats to action. And it meant River. The 17 miners she saved, the children who played with her, the colony that had become her home, were all about to become casualties in a war that had been going on for centuries. Contact Ambassador Fenn, Allison said. Tell him we need council intervention immediately. Tell him if he doesn't want an interspecies incident that makes history, he needs to get here now. That will take hours. Those ships will be in firing range in minutes. River made a sound, that same resonant hum she had used at the mine collapse. The other Vral responded, their voices joining hers in harmony. It was beautiful and terrible, a song that spoke of defiance and determination and the refusal to go quietly. Then we buy time, Allison said. She looked at the assembled colonists, seeing fear and doubt but also resolve. We stand together. We make them understand that if they want to kill River, they'll have to go through all of us first. Governor Peters stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded and activated the colony-wide channel. All colonists, this is the governor. We have incoming hostiles. They are here to attack one of our own. We're going to show them what happens when someone threatens this colony. Get to your positions. The miners moved first, heading for equipment that could be weaponized. The scientists began securing sensitive data. The teachers gathered the children into the reinforced shelters. And Allison stood at the colony entrance with River beside her, watching 8 warships descend through Telos 4's atmosphere, coming to end an experiment that had dared to suggest peace was possible. Stay close to me, Allison whispered to River. Whatever happens, stay close. River pressed her head against Allison's shoulder and sang. The Coalition for Galactic Safety ships hung in the sky like deadly stars, their weapons ports glowing as they charged. Allison could see them through the atmospheric haze, could calculate in her head how long it would take for their missiles to reach the colony. Not long enough to evacuate, not long enough to run. The lead ship's communication channel crackled to life. The voice that came through was flat, emotionless, certain in its righteousness. Telos 4 Colony, this is Commander Brasht of the Coalition Fleet. We are authorized under Emergency Protocol 7 to eliminate confirmed Vrail threats. Surrender the creature immediately or be considered hostile collaborators. Governor Peters keyed his own channel. Commander, the individual you're calling a threat saved 17 lives last week. She's been living peacefully with humans for 3 years. There's no danger here. The existence of any Vrail is a danger. Your failure to eliminate it when it was found constitutes a violation of standing council orders. You have 5 minutes to comply. Peters looked at Allison. She shook her head. I'm not handing her over to be executed. Then, we're all going to die here. Maybe, but at least we'll die, standing for something that matters. River sensed the tension in Allison's body and made a low questioning sound. The Vrail refugees had spread out, positioning themselves between the colony and the descending ships. Night Sky stood at the front, body coiled and ready. They cannot take her, Night Sky said. If River dies, hope dies with her. Hope that our species can be more than hunted animals. Hope that the galaxy might someday see us as people. Your species killed billions, Brasht's voice cut in. Apparently the channels were set to broadcast. You forfeited your right to hope when you committed genocide. My species defended ourselves, Night Sky shot back. But you are right about one thing. Blood was spilled. Terrible blood. So let me ask you, Commander, when does the killing stop? When every last Vrail is dead? When you've eliminated an entire sentient species? Will that bring back the people you lost, or will it just make you murderers too? We are not murderers. We are protectors. You are here to kill a juvenile who has done nothing but save lives. How does that protect anyone? The ships continued their descent. 3 minutes. Allison pulled up every scrap of courage she had and activated her own transmitter, broadcasting on all frequencies. My name is Dr. Allison Reed. I'm the one who found River. I'm the one who raised her. If you're going to kill her, you need to hear me first. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I know you're scared. I know your species has history with Vrail. I know you've lost people. But fear is not the same as wisdom. Fear wants us to destroy what we don't understand. Wisdom asks us to try understanding first. Pretty words won't change what that creature is, Brasht replied. You're right. River is a Vrail. She has claws and teeth and strength that could tear through metal. But she also has compassion and intelligence and the capacity to love. She plays with children. She rescued trapped miners. She learned 3 languages because she wanted to understand us better. Tell me, Commander, which of those things makes her a monster? Her nature makes her a monster. Her species makes her a monster. Then what does our nature make us? We're the ones pointing weapons at children. We're the ones who decided an entire species should be hunted to extinction. We're the ones who see something different and immediately reach for violence. Allison's voice strengthened. River had every reason to grow up hating us. Her mother died in a cage. She was orphaned by our cruelty. She could have become everything you fear. Instead, she became someone who saves lives. Maybe that says more about her nature than yours. There was silence on the channel. The ships held position, not advancing but not retreating. 2 minutes. Then a new voice cut through the transmission, sharp and familiar. Coalition Fleet, this is Ambassador Fenn of the Galactic Council. You are ordered to stand down immediately. Hope flared in Allison's chest. She saw a Council diplomatic ship emerging from faster-than-light transit, moving to position itself between the Coalition Fleet and the colony. Ambassador, with respect, we have authorization, Brasht said. Your authorization predates the new evidence presented to the Council. Evidence I personally witnessed. Evidence that suggests we have been operating under false assumptions about Vrail behavior for centuries. Fenn's voice was calm but carried absolute authority. I am here on direct orders from the Council Chair. You will stand down or you will be fired upon. You would defend a Vrail? You whose people lost billions to them? I would defend the truth. And the truth is that we have been lied to. Fenn paused. 3 days ago, I received documentation from a historical research team. They found suppressed records dating back to the beginning of the Vrail conflicts. records that show a very different story than the one we were taught. I am transmitting those records to you now, Commander. I suggest you review them before you commit genocide. Allison watched her display as data packets flooded the channels. She pulled them up on her own screen, speed reading through centuries-old reports, trade agreements, peace treaties, diplomatic correspondence, and then the communications that changed everything. Internal memos from mining corporations discussing how to handle the Vrail problem, strategic plans for displacing them from valuable territories, proposals for propaganda campaigns to paint them as dangerous. One document in particular stood out. It was a message from a corporate executive to a military commander, dated 2 weeks before the attack on the Taurian homeworld. Phase 3 initiated. Breeding grounds in Sector 7 destroyed as planned. Expect significant Vrail response. Ensure all media coverage focuses on Vrail aggression, not our operations. Public support for extermination protocols should increase substantially. This is fabricated, Brush said, but his voice lacked conviction. It is not. Every document has been verified by 3 independent analysis teams. The chain of custody is impeccable. The encryption is period authentic. Fenn's tone hardened. We did not just fight back against Vrail aggression, Commander. We created that aggression. We pushed them until they had no choice but to fight. And then we used their desperate defense as justification for wiping them out. Even if that's true, it doesn't change what they are. It doesn't make them safe. No, but neither does it make them inherently evil, and it means we owe them a chance. The council ship moved closer to the colony, its shields extending to cover the settlement. The council is calling an emergency tribunal. We are going to review everything we know about Vrail, everything we thought we knew, and determine a new path forward. River will be a witness at that tribunal. She will be protected. And if you attack this colony, Commander, you will be committing an act of war against the Council itself. The coalition ships held position for a long, agonizing moment. Allison could almost feel Brash weighing his options, measuring his certainty against potential consequences. Finally, the ships began to withdraw, rising back through the atmosphere. This is not over, Brash said. The Council may protect that creature today, but public opinion will not change. Fear is too deeply rooted. Then we will dig it up and plant something new. Fenn replied. That is how civilizations grow. Stand down, Commander. That is a direct order. The Coalition fleet broke orbit and jumped away, leaving Telos 4 in tense peace. Allison felt her legs go weak with relief. She sat down hard on the ground, and River immediately curled around her, making worried sounds. It's okay, Allison whispered, though she wasn't sure it was. We're okay. Fenn's shuttle landed an hour later. He emerged looking exhausted, his fur disheveled, his eyes carrying the weight of impossible decisions. He approached Allison and River slowly, accompanied by a security detail that kept their weapons holstered but ready. Dr. Reed, River. He nodded to each in turn. That was closer than I would have preferred. Thank you for coming, for standing up for her. I did not do it for her, not entirely. Fenn sat down on a nearby rock, suddenly looking old. I did it because I realized my entire life has been built on lies. My people's trauma is real. The deaths were real. But the story we told ourselves about why those deaths happened was a fiction designed to serve corporate interests. And I cannot live with that. What happens now? Allison asked. Now we go to the Council's main station. You, River, the witnesses who saw her rescue the miners, and representatives from Night Sky's refugee group. We present everything to the full Council and let them decide. He looked at River with something like wonder. She really saved those miners? Without hesitation? Without hesitation. She put herself in danger to help people who should have been terrified of her. My grandfather died in the homeworld attack. I grew up on stories of Vrail as demons, as unstoppable killers. I have carried that fear my entire life. Fenn extended his paw slowly toward River. She watched him carefully, then leaned forward to sniff his fur. I thought I would panic if I was ever this close to a Vrail. Thought my body would shut down from ancestral terror. But looking at her now, all I feel is sadness for what we did, for what we became in the name of safety. River made her soft chirping sound and gently touched her nose to Fenn's paw. The ambassador's eyes filled with tears. Come, he said after a moment. We have a lot of work to do and not much time. The tribunal convenes in 10 days. We need to prepare testimony. gather evidence, and somehow convince 200 species that everything they know about Vral is wrong. And if we fail? Allison asked. Then River will likely be executed, and the scattered people will continue to be hunted until none remain. And the galaxy will have missed its chance to correct a terrible wrong. Fen stood, squaring his shoulders. So we will not fail. Humanity has shown us something remarkable. Now the rest of us must rise to meet that example. The next week was a blur of preparation. Scientists compiled research. The rescued miners practiced their testimony. Night Sky and the other refugees gathered every scrap of documentation about their people's true history. And Allison spent hours with River, knowing these might be their last peaceful days together. On the night before they were scheduled to leave for the council station, Allison couldn't sleep. She found River in the courtyard, lying on her back and looking up at Talos Fo's twin moons. Are you scared? Allison asked, sitting beside her. River made a sound that was half chirp, half hum. It translated in Allison's implant as uncertain affirmation. Me too, but you know what? I think being scared means we understand what's at stake. And understanding what's at stake means we'll fight that much harder. Allison ran her hand along River's scales, feeling the familiar texture that had become as natural as breathing. Whatever happens at that tribunal, I want you to know something. You are the bravest, kindest, most remarkable person I have ever met. Any species. Any world. You could have grown up angry and violent and no one would have blamed you. Instead, you chose to be gentle. You chose to help. You chose to love. That is your nature, River, not violence, not rage. Love. River rolled over and rested her head in Allison's lap. They stayed that way for hours, human and Vral, watching the stars and trying to find courage for what came next. In the distance, Night Sky sang the old songs of her people, ballads of stars and hope and refusal to surrender. The other refugees joined in, their voices rising into the night sky. And across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds, billions of beings watched the news feeds and argued about monsters and mercy, about fear and forgiveness, about whether a human and a Vral could really change everything. The tribunal would decide. But the story was already written in the hearts of everyone who had watched River save those miners, who had seen her play with children, who had heard her gentle chirp and realized that maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong about what made something dangerous. Tomorrow they would find out if compassion could defeat centuries of propaganda. Tomorrow they would learn if one human's choice to love instead of fear had been enough to save an entire species. Tomorrow. But tonight, Allison held River close and let herself hope. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council was designed to inspire awe. It stretched 300 meters from floor to ceiling, with walls made of transparent alloy that showed the stars beyond. 200 species had seats arranged in concentric circles around the central floor, each position marked by holographic displays and translation matrices. The architecture itself was meant to remind everyone present that they were part of something larger than themselves, something that spanned the galaxy. Allison felt very small standing on that central floor. She had arrived with River 2 days ago, traveling aboard Ambassador Fenn's diplomatic ship. The journey had been tense but uneventful. River had spent most of it pressed against the observation windows, watching stars streak past in faster-than-light transit. She had never left Telos 4 before, never seen space from this perspective. The wonder in her eyes had almost made Allison forget why they were here, but now, standing before the assembled council with cameras broadcasting to billions across the galaxy, the reality settled over Allison like a weight. Everything depended on what happened in this hall. River's life, the future of every remaining Vral, the question of whether the galaxy could face its own mistakes and choose a different path. This tribunal will come to order. The council chair was a Wandiri named Eldest Song, a being who looked like living crystal, and whose species measured age in millennia. Her voice resonated through the chamber like music. We are gathered to address the matter of classification status for the species designated as Vral, and to determine appropriate protocols for interaction with individual known as River. Who speaks first? Ambassador Fenn rose from the Taurian delegation. Honored Chair, I request the right to present opening statements. Recognized, Ambassador Fenn, you may proceed. Fenn activated a holographic display that filled the center of the hall. Images appeared, documents, video recordings. For 400 years, the Galactic Council has classified Vrel as non-sentient apex predators. This classification has justified their extermination, their exclusion from all protections afforded to sentient species, and policies that have pushed them to the edge of extinction. He paused, letting the words settle. I am here to present evidence that this classification was based on lies, that it was manufactured by corporate interests seeking to exploit Vrel territory, and that we have committed atrocities in the name of safety when we were really committing them in the name of profit. Murmurs rose from the assembled delegates. Fen continued, walking through centuries of suppressed documentation. Trade agreements between early Vrel civilizations and galactic explorers, cultural exchanges, peace treaties, and then the shift, when mining corporations identified valuable resources in Vrel space and began a systematic campaign to paint them as monsters. These documents show premeditation, Fen said, highlighting a particularly damning memo. Show planning. Show that the attacks we suffered were responses to provocations we initiated. We pushed the Vrel into defending themselves, then used their defense as proof of their savage nature. A delegate from the Hrogan Confederacy stood. Ambassador, are you suggesting that the deaths of 3 billion Taurians were justified? That my people's suffering at Vrel Claws was acceptable? No. I am saying that suffering is never acceptable from any side. The Taurians who died were innocent. The Vrel whose breeding grounds were destroyed were innocent. The truth is not that one side was right and the other wrong. The truth is that we were all victims of manipulation, and that continuation of that manipulation serves no one but those who profit from division. If I may. Night Sky rose from the guest section, her voice carried by the translation matrix. I am called Night Sky. I represent the scattered people, what you call Vrel refugees. I was born after the Great Dispersal, after my people were declared monsters and hunted across the galaxy. I have spent my entire life running, hiding, watching my family die one by one because we could not find safe refuge anywhere in Council space. She moved to stand beside Fen. My grandmother was at the attack on the Taurian homeworld. She was there because she was tracking the mercenaries who had killed her cubs. She did not want to attack civilians. She wanted to find the ones who had destroyed her family. But when she arrived, she found a swarm of other Vrel, all driven mad by grief, all attacking anything they could reach. She tried to stop them. She died trying to stop them. But history only remembers that she was there. History only remembers the deaths. Night Sky activated her own display, showing images of Vrel worlds, beautiful places with cities built into cliffsides, gardens that glowed with bioluminescent flowers, gathering halls where her people had once debated philosophy and science. We were not monsters. We were people. We had art and music and dreams for the future, and we lost all of it because we refused to be displaced from our ancestral homes. You paint yourselves as victims, another delegate said, but Vrel have killed thousands across the galaxy. How do you explain the attacks? The violence? Fear, Night Sky replied simply. When you are hunted constantly, when every encounter with other species ends in death, you stop trying to make peace. You fight or you die. For 400 years, that has been our choice. Fight or die. Never live. Never thrive. Just survive. She looked at River, who sat quietly beside Allison. Until a human found one of us and chose kindness instead of killing. Until River was given a chance to grow up without that fear. And look what happened. She saved lives. She learned. She loved. That is what we could all be if we were given the chance. Eldest Song gestured to Allison. Dr. Reed, you have spent 3 years with River. Present your testimony. Allison stepped forward, suddenly aware of how many eyes were on her. How many cameras? How many beings across the galaxy watching this moment? I'm not a politician. I'm not a diplomat. I'm just a xenobiologist who found a frightened baby and did what felt right. But in those 3 years, I've learned something important. River isn't different from other Vrel because she's special or unique. She's different because she was given the opportunity to be different. She activated footage from Telos 4, River playing with children, River solving puzzles, River at the mine collapse clearing debris, River touching her nose to Ambassador Fen's paw in the courtyard. Every day River chooses compassion. She chooses to help instead of harm. She chooses to build relationships instead of destroying them. But here's what I realized. Those aren't choices that come naturally to predators. They're choices that come naturally to people. River isn't a tame Vrail, she's just a Vrail who was allowed to be a person. The miner, Patricia, stood next. I was trapped in that collapse. I was running out of air. I could hear the ceiling coming down around us. And then I heard something moving in the tunnel. I thought I was going to die. I thought a Vraal had found us and we were finished. Her voice broke. Instead, River saved my life. She held up a collapsing ceiling with her own body so I could crawl past. She got hurt protecting me. A monster doesn't do that. A hero does that. One by one, the other 16 miners gave their testimony. Then the colonists who had watched River grow. Then the scientists who had studied her. Each one painting a picture of a being who defied every assumption the galaxy held about her species. But the opposition was fierce. The Coalition for Galactic Safety presented their own evidence. Recordings of Vraal attacks.
Casualty reports spanning centuries.
Images of destroyed colonies and grieving survivors. They brought witnesses whose families had been killed by Vraal. They made their case that regardless of historical context, Vraal were too dangerous to allow in civilized space. The debate stretched for hours, then days. Delegates argued passionately on both sides. Some called for River to be granted special status but maintained that other Vraal were still threats. Some called for immediate extermination of all remaining Vraal. Some suggested quarantine zones where they could live but never leave. Through it all, River sat beside Allison on the central floor, a silent presence that became increasingly significant. She didn't rage or threaten. She didn't attack despite being surrounded by beings who argued for her death. She simply sat, occasionally making soft sounds, waiting with a patience that seemed impossible for a supposed monster. On the fourth day, something changed. A young delegate from the Taurian section rose. He couldn't have been more than 20 standard years old, barely old enough to hold a council seat. Honored chair, may I speak? You are recognized, Junior Delegate Tiffin. I lost my parents in a Vraal attack when I was 7. I was raised by my grandmother, who lost her entire family in the homeworld attack. I grew up on stories about Vraal as demons, as evil incarnate. Typhon's voice shook but held steady. I came to this tribunal wanting River executed, wanting all Vraal eliminated. I wanted revenge for what I lost. He left his seat and walked down to the central floor. Allison tensed, suddenly aware that they had allowed a traumatized Taurian to approach River unchallenged. But Typhon didn't pull a weapon. He held something in his paws, a piece of paper. Yesterday, my grandmother sent me this. It's a letter she wrote but never sent, addressed to the Vraal who killed my parents. She wrote it years ago in a grief counseling session. He held up the paper. She wrote about her anger, her hatred. But then she wrote something else. She wrote, I hate you for what you took from me. But I also hate the galaxy that made you into what you are. I hate that we never asked why you attacked. I hate that we never tried to understand. I hate that my grandchildren will grow up in a galaxy where we solve everything with violence. Just like you did. Just like we've always done. Typhon knelt in front of River. She watched him with those amber eyes, head tilted in curiosity. My grandmother died 3 days ago. Her last words to me were, find out if that Vraal cub is different. Find out if we've been wrong. And if we have, Typhon, have the courage to admit it. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a drawing. A child's artwork, showing a Taurian and a Vraal standing together under stars. I drew this when I was 8. Before I learned to be afraid, before I learned to hate, I want to give it to River. I want to see if my grandmother was right. Allison held her breath. River looked at the drawing, then at Typhon, then back at the drawing. She lowered her head and took the paper gently in her jaws, careful not to tear it. Then she did something that made every being in the chamber freeze. She leaned forward and touched her nose to Typhon's forehead. The same gesture of trust and affection she gave to Allison. The same one she had given to Ambassador Fenn. A gesture that said, I see you. I acknowledge your pain. I offer peace. Typhon wrapped his arms around River's neck and sobbed. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Then slowly it broke. A human delegate began clapping. Then another. Then a Wandiri. A Shard, a Rogan. The applause spread through the hall like ripples. Species who had argued bitterly for days suddenly united in witnessing something impossible become real. Elda's song let the moment continue for a full minute before calling for order. When the chamber quieted, she spoke. I believe we have seen what we needed to see. River has demonstrated sapience, empathy, and restraint under circumstances that would challenge any being. The question before us is no longer whether she is dangerous. The question is whether we have the courage to admit we were wrong. She rose, her crystalline body catching the starlight beyond the windows. I call for a vote. All those in favor of reclassifying Vrel as sentient species with full council protections, signify now. The voting boards lit up across the hall. Allison couldn't breathe. She watched the count climb, watched delegations that had been hostile just hours ago vote in favor, watched centuries of fear begin to crack under the weight of one Vral's gentleness. When the count finished, Eldest Song announced the results. The measure passes. Effective immediately, Vrel are recognized as sentient. All extermination protocols are rescinded. Protected territories will be established in former Vrel space, and River is granted full citizenship status with rights and protections equal to any council member. The hall erupted. Some cheered, some protested, but the decision was made. The course was set. After 400 years, the galaxy had chosen to stop running from fear and try walking toward understanding instead. Allison fell to her knees beside River and wrapped her arms around the Vrale's neck. We did it. We actually did it. River made her happiest chirp, the sound she only made when everything felt safe and right. And across the galaxy, billions watched a human and a Vral embrace, and began to wonder what other impossible things might become possible if they were brave enough to try. 5 years after the tribunal, Allison stood at the edge of the sanctuary and watched the sun rise over mountains that had once been hunting grounds for bounty hunters. Now they were home to 63 Vral, the largest free population in 4 centuries. The sanctuary covered 3,000 square kilometers of protected land on Talos 4, expanded from the original colony to accommodate returning refugees. River had grown into full adulthood, now nearly 4 meters long with scales that gleamed like polished obsidian in the morning light. She stood beside Allison at the overlook as she did most mornings, watching her people rebuild what had been lost. 3 more families arrived yesterday, Allison said, checking her datapad. That brings the total to 94 Vral across all the sanctuaries. Still a long way from a sustainable population, but more than we had 5 years ago. River made a complex sound, part words and part melody. Allison's translator rendered it as satisfied hope. River had become fluent in 5 languages now, splitting her time between helping new arrivals adjust and serving as official ambassador to the council. She traveled between worlds, speaking at universities and government halls, a living example of what Vral could be when given the chance. But she always came home to Telos 4, always came back to the red desert where her story had started. Ambassador Fenn is arriving this afternoon, Allison continued. He's bringing delegates from the Taurian government. They want to discuss the memorial proposal. The memorial had been Typhon's idea, a monument on the Taurian homeworld honoring both Taurian victims of Vral attacks and Vral victims of galactic persecution, a place where grief could exist alongside acknowledgement of mutual suffering. It had been controversial, predictably, but Typhon had spent 5 years building support. Now he served as the Taurian ambassador to Vral territories, dedicating his life to the healing his grandmother had wanted to see. River chirped acknowledgement and moved down the trail toward the settlement. Allison followed, as she had followed River through every stage of this journey. They walked past gardens where Vral tended crops using techniques they had preserved through centuries of exile, past workshops where artisans were rediscovering traditional crafts, past a nursery where 4 cubs played under the watchful eyes of their parents and human volunteers. The cubs had been the turning point. When the first Vral cubs were born in the sanctuary 2 years ago, raised by their biological parents with human support, they had proven what Allison had always believed. River wasn't special. River wasn't an anomaly. She was simply what all Vral could become when raised without fear. The 4 cubs spotted River and came bounding over, chirping excitedly. They were growing fast, already the size of large dogs, their scales still showing the lighter colors of youth. River lowered herself to let them climb on her back, rumbling affectionately as they tumbled over each other. Allison felt a familiar warmth in her chest. This was what she had fought for. Not just River's survival, but the possibility of futures like this. Vral cubs playing safely. Vral parents teaching their young the old stories. Vral being allowed to simply exist without constantly running or fighting. Dr. Reed, A young human woman jogged up, slightly out of breath. Her name was Chen, and she was one of 30 humans now trained in what had become known as the Reed Protocol. Methods for working with Vral, building trust, facilitating communication. We have a situation that needs your input. What kind of situation? A ship arrived this morning. Independent trader. They're carrying a Vrel they found injured in deep space. The captain wants to know if we can take her in, but there's a complication. Chen paused. The Vral is badly traumatized. She's been attacking anyone who gets close. They've had her sedated for 2 weeks just to keep her contained. Allison's heart sank. This was the other side of the story. For every Vrel-like River who got the chance to heal, there were dozens who had spent their entire lives being hunted, who had never known kindness, who had been so damaged by trauma that they might never be able to trust again. Take me to the ship. The trader vessel was small and worn, the kind of ship used by independents running the far edges of council space. Its captain was a Hrogan named Worf, gruff but clearly concerned about his unexpected passenger. Found her in a debris field, he explained, leading Allison to the cargo hold. Looked like she'd been in a fight with hunters. Had spear wounds all over. Was barely alive. I couldn't just leave her. He stopped outside a reinforced containment cell, but she won't let anyone help her. She's dying and she won't let anyone close enough to treat her injuries. Allison peered through the observation port. The Vral inside was smaller than River, her scales a mottled brown and gray. She was curled in the corner of the cell, breathing shallowly. Even sedated, her body was tense, coiled for attack. Scars covered her body, some old, some fresh. This was a Vral who had lived every nightmare Night Sky described. A person who had been treated like a monster so long she had no choice but to become one. What's your plan? Worf asked. I'm going in. That's suicide. Maybe. But she's not going to trust any of us unless we show her we're willing to be vulnerable. Allison started unfastening the containment cell lock. At least take a weapon. No, that would defeat the entire point. Allison opened the door and stepped inside. Before she could second-guess herself, the Vral's eyes snapped open immediately. Whatever sedatives they had given her, they were clearly wearing off. She uncurled with a hiss that showed every one of her teeth, claws extending, body language screaming threat. Allison sat down on the floor, making herself as non-threatening as possible. My name is Allison. I'm not going to hurt you. The Vral lunged. Allison forced herself not to flinch, not to run, not to do any of the things that every instinct demanded. She stayed still as the Vral stopped centimeters from her face, jaws open, hot breath washing over her. I know you've been hurt, Allison said quietly. I know everyone you've ever met has tried to kill you. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'm asking you to try. Please let me help you. The Vral trembled. For a moment, Allison thought she had miscalculated, thought those jaws were going to close and everything she had built would end here. But then the Vral made a sound. Not a growl or a hiss, a whimper, the sound of someone who was in pain and afraid and so tired of fighting. I know, Allison whispered. I know you're tired. You don't have to fight anymore. You're safe now. I promise you're safe. The Vral collapsed, just folded in on herself, all the aggression draining away to reveal the terrified, wounded person underneath. Allison moved slowly, carefully, placing her hand on the Vral's scales. The creature flinched but didn't pull away. River, Allison called softly. She had asked River to stay within earshot, knowing this might happen. Can you come here, please? River appeared in the doorway. The traumatized Vral lifted her head, seeing another of her species for the first time in who knew how long. River began to sing, one of the old songs Night Sky had taught her, a lullaby about stars and safety and home. The traumatized Vral joined in, her voice broken and uncertain. But she sang, and slowly, with River's help, Allison began treating her wounds. It took weeks for the new Vral to stabilize. Weeks of patient care, of River's constant presence, of humans proving over and over that they meant no harm. She never fully trusted like River did. The damage went too deep for that. But eventually she stopped flinching at every sound, stopped attacking reflexively, learned to accept that food would come regularly and no one would hurt her while she ate. Allison named her Dusk because she had come to them at the end of a long darkness when hope seemed impossible. And Dusk, damaged and scarred and wary, became another kind of proof. Proof that healing was possible. Proof that even the most traumatized Vral could find peace if given the chance. The memorial unveiling happened on a clear day, when the Taurian homeworld sky was the particular shade of purple that the Taurians considered auspicious. Billions watched via live feed as Eldest Song, Ambassador Fen, Typhon, Night Sky, River, and Allison stood before the monument. It was beautiful in its simplicity. A wall of names. Taurian dead on one side, Vrel dead on the other, and in the center an inscription in every council language. Here we remember all who died in the cycle of fear and violence. Here we choose to break that cycle. Here we plant hope that our children will know peace we could not achieve. Never forget. Always learn. Choose understanding. Typhon spoke first. My grandmother asked me to find courage. I think she would be proud of what we found together. Not just courage to admit we were wrong, but courage to imagine we could be better. Night Sky spoke next. My people have a saying, stars remember everything. For 400 years, the stars remembered only our suffering. Now perhaps they will remember our healing as well. When it was Allison's turn, she looked at River standing beside her at dusk who had made the journey to be present. At the cubs who would grow up in a different galaxy than their ancestors had known. I'm not special, Allison said. I didn't do anything remarkable. I just found someone who needed help and chose to help them. That's not heroism. That's just being decent. But maybe that's the point. Maybe changing the galaxy doesn't require heroes. Maybe it just requires enough people choosing to be decent at the same time. River sang then, a song that Night Sky had taught her, that Night Sky's grandmother had sung during the attack on this very world. But River changed the ending. Instead of the traditional conclusion about defending to the last breath, she sang about finding peace, about laying down weapons, about the courage it takes to trust when trust has only ever led to pain. The Taurians present wept, the Vral refugees wept, and across the galaxy, beings who had spent their lives believing in irreconcilable differences wondered if maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong. 10 years after the tribunal, Allison received a message from a research station on the edge of Council space. They had found a member of another species that had been classified as non-sentient predators, a species that had been hunted and feared for generations. They had found a juvenile orphaned alone. They wanted to know if Allison would help them try something impossible. She sat in her quarters on Telos 4 looking at the request. Outside her window, River was teaching the growing crop of cubs how to use their strength gently. How to play without hurting. How to be powerful and kind at the same time. Dusk sat nearby, still wary but beginning to learn trust. Other Vrale worked in gardens or workshops or simply lay in the sun, doing nothing more dangerous than existing. Allison thought about that first night, when a dying Vrale had pushed her cub toward a stranger. When Allison had made a promise without knowing what it would cost or what it would achieve. When she had chosen to see a person where everyone else saw a monster. She thought about everything that choice had led to. The tribunal. The sanctuaries, the memorial, the peace that was still fragile but growing stronger every day. She thought about Typhon dedicating his life to healing instead of revenge, about Fen facing his people's trauma and choosing truth over comfortable lies, about Worf, the traitor who had risked everything to save a Vral he didn't know. One act of compassion, one choice to love instead of fear, and the ripples spreading outward, changing everything they touched. Allison sent her reply. Yes, she would help. She would teach them the Reed Protocol. She would show them what she had learned about seeing past fear, because that was what humans did. They looked at impossible situations and said, what if it's not impossible? They saw monsters and asked, what if they're just misunderstood? They stood at the edge of fear and chose to step forward instead of back. River came to find her as the twin moons rose. She curled up beside Allison's chair, head in her lap, making the soft chirping sound that meant contentment. They sat together in comfortable silence, human and Vrale, while the stars wheeled overhead and somewhere far away another species waited to learn if compassion could save them too. We did something important, Allison said softly. Didn't we? River's answer came in her own language, the one Night Sky had taught her. The translator rendered it as, we taught them to see. Now others will see differently too. The story spreads. Hope spreads. Fear shrinks. The entire Empire still fears this story, Allison mused. Fen told me that once. He was right, but not the way he thought. They don't fear you anymore. They fear what your existence means. They fear that if they were wrong about Vral, they might be wrong about everything else. They fear the work it takes to change. River made a sound that vibrated through Allison's bones. It translated as good. Fear is honest. Fear means they understand something must change. Better than comfort. Better than pretending. Allison smiled. When did you get so wise? River's answer needed no translation. She simply pressed closer, trusting completely the way she had that first night when she was small and scared and alone. The way she still trusted every morning when she woke up in a galaxy that had tried to destroy her, and found instead that one human's love was stronger than centuries of hate. They sat together as darkness fell and lights began to glow across the sanctuary. Frail and human and the impossible peace they had built together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More traumatized Vrel to help, more skeptics to convince, more hard work to transform fear into understanding. But tonight Allison held River close and let herself rest in what they had accomplished. She had raised a predator cub and watched her become a person who saved lives. She had stood before the galaxy and asked them to admit they were wrong. She had planted a seed of hope in soil that everyone said was too poisoned to grow anything. And the seed had grown, was still growing, would continue growing long after Allison was gone, tended by humans and Vrel and every species willing to choose compassion over convenience. The Empire feared this story because this story proved that change was possible, that centuries of tradition could be overturned by a single act of kindness, that the difference between a monster and a hero was often just whether anyone had bothered to offer love. Let them fear it, Allison thought. Let the story spread and make people uncomfortable. Let it challenge everything they thought they knew, because discomfort was the price of growth, and growth was the only way forward. River began to hum, a melody without words. Allison joined her, their voices blending in the darkness. Human and Vrel, teacher and student, friend and friend, making music together while the galaxy slowly learned to do the same. And somewhere in the vastness of space, another orphan waited, alone and afraid, not knowing that help was coming, not knowing that the galaxy was learning, slowly but surely, to choose understanding over fear, not knowing that their story might be the next impossible thing to become real. But they would learn. Just as River had learned, just as the galaxy was still learning, one act of compassion at a time.